Imagine this. You are 8 months pregnant. You are surrounded by 40 of your closest friends and family. The baby shower is perfect. White tents, beautiful gifts, laughter everywhere. And then your mother-in-law stands up, reaches into her designer handbag, and drops a manila envelope in your lap. Inside, divorce papers, filed by your own husband, with a full custody claim for your children. In front of everyone, she smiles at you and says, "It is a kindness, really. We are freeing you. Bradley has found someone more suitable, someone from our world." Your husband will not even look at you. He is standing by the door, staring at the floor, while the woman he has been sleeping with is already posting their photo online with the caption, "New Beginnings." You collapse. The stress triggers contractions. An ambulance is called, and within 12 hours your money is gone, your children are taken, and your reputation is being destroyed in court. They think they have won. They think you are finished. But here is what nobody in that room knew. Not the husband, not the mother-in-law, not the mistress, not a single person at that baby shower, the woman they just threw away like she was nothing. She is secretly worth $30 billion, and she is about to burn their entire empire to the ground. Stay with me. Lesson and value statement. Before we begin, here is why this story matters. This is not just about money or revenge. This is about what happens when someone decides that you are disposable, that your worth is measured by your last name, your background, or where you came from. And it is about the quiet, unshakable power of a woman who refuses to be defined by the people who underestimated her. If you have ever been told you are not enough, if someone has ever looked through you like you were invisible, this story is for you. Because the most powerful people in the world are not the ones making the most noise. They are the ones building in silence. If this story hit you somewhere deep, do me a favor. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done in Claire's position? Would you have revealed the $30 billion immediately? Or would you have waited, just like she did? I read every single comment, and your answers always start the best conversations. If you know someone who needs to hear this story tonight, someone who is going through something hard, someone who has been underestimated, share this video with them. Sometimes a story is the reminder we need that we are stronger than we think. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We tell stories like this every week, stories about ordinary people who refuse to stay down when life knocked them to the floor. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.
A woman stands in the doorway of a $40 million penthouse, looking out over Manhattan. The city pulses below her, alive with light and ambition and the kind of energy that never sleeps. She holds a phone to her ear. On the other end, a man is begging, crying. His voice cracks with the kind of desperation that comes only when you realize, too late, what you have lost. "Please, Claire, I made a mistake. I will do anything." She pauses. Her eyes drift to the marble counter where a set of divorce papers sits in a simple black frame, not a trophy, a reminder. She takes a slow breath, and when she speaks, her voice is steady, calm, and final. "You should have loved me." She hangs up the phone, places it gently on the counter beside the frame, and for a moment she stands perfectly still, watching the lights of the city stretch toward the horizon like 1,000 tiny promises. But this is not where the story begins. Rewind. 6 months earlier. The morning of the baby shower started the way most beautiful disasters do, with sunshine and optimism and the quiet belief that everything was going to be fine. Claire Weston stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom of the Ashford estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, turning sideways to examine her reflection. 8 months pregnant. Her third child, a boy this time. The dress she had picked out, a soft ivory wrap with delicate lace along the sleeves, no longer fit the way it had when she bought it 3 weeks ago. She tugged at the zipper behind her back, straining, her fingers barely reaching. She grabbed her phone and called Sophie Bennett. Sophie answered on the first ring. "Tell me you are not trying to fit into that dress." "It fit last week," Claire said, still pulling. "Claire, at 8 months pregnant, that zipper is a suggestion, not a requirement. Wear the blue one." Claire laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that comes from the belly, warm and unguarded. She did not know it then, but it would be the last time she laughed like that for a very long time. She changed into the blue dress, loose, flowing, forgiving. She looked at herself one more time and whispered something her foster mother, Ruth, used to say when Claire was a girl growing up in group homes across Ohio. Never put all your cards on the table at once. You keep your ace where nobody can see it. That advice had shaped everything. Her business, her investments, her marriage. Claire Weston was not just a small business consultant married into old Connecticut money. She was the sole owner of Lakeview Capital, a holding company with assets valued at $30.2 billion, 340 commercial properties across 12 states, a venture capital portfolio with stakes in 47 technology companies, controlling interest in 3 publicly traded firms. Nobody knew. Not Bradley, not Victoria, not a single person in the Ashford family had any idea that the woman they considered beneath them was one of the wealthiest people in the country. And Claire wanted it that way. Because when she met Bradley Ashford III at a charity gala 6 years ago, she saw how people changed around money, how their eyes shifted, how their smiles became performances. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not what she had. So she kept her empire hidden, run quietly by Sophie Bennett, her best friend and the chief operating officer of Lakeview Capital. It was the smartest decision she had ever made, and also, as it turned out, the most dangerous. The baby shower was set up on the south lawn of the Ashford estate. White tents, hydrangeas, and crystal vases, a 3-tier cake with pale blue frosting, 42 guests, a mix of Claire's friends, Bradley's colleagues, and Victoria's society circle. Catering from the club, everything perfect. Claire moved through the crowd, greeting guests, accepting hugs, laughing at jokes about how big she had gotten. She noticed Bradley standing near the bar, his phone pressed to his ear, his back turned to the party. He had been distant lately, more than distant, cold. But she told herself it was stress. Work, the baby coming. She told herself a lot of things. Victoria Ashford, her mother-in-law, was holding court near the gift table. 62 years old, silver hair swept into a flawless chignon, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Victoria had never liked Claire. She had made that clear from the beginning, in small ways. In the way she introduced Claire to friends as Bradley's wife, instead of by name, in the way she asked about Claire's little consulting work. With a smile that never reached her eyes. But today, Victoria was being unusually warm. She had complimented Claire's dress. She had touched her arm. She had smiled. And something about that smile made Claire's stomach turn. The moment came at 2:17 in the afternoon. Claire would remember the time because she had just glanced at her watch, thinking about when to cut the cake. Victoria stood up from her chair and tapped a silver spoon against her glass of sparkling water. The soft chime cut through the chatter, and the lawn went quiet. "If I could have everyone's attention," Victoria said, her voice carrying the practiced authority of a woman who had spent her life commanding rooms. "I would like to give Claire a very special gift today, something that has been a long time coming." She reached into her Hermes bag and pulled out a large manila envelope. She walked to where Claire sat in a white wicker chair, surrounded by wrapping paper and tiny baby clothes, and placed the envelope in her lap. "Happy baby shower, dear." Claire looked down at the envelope. It was heavy, official. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the flap and pulled out the documents inside. The words blurred for a moment, then snapped into focus. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed by Bradley Robert Ashford III, including a custody claim for all 3 children. Divorce papers. served at her baby shower, in front of 42 people. The lawn went silent. Someone dropped a glass. Claire heard it shatter against the stone patio, but it sounded far away, like it was happening in another world. She looked up at Victoria. Victoria's expression was serene, almost peaceful, the way a person looks when they have been waiting a long time for something and it has finally arrived. "It is a kindness, really," Victoria said. "We are freeing you. Bradley has found someone more suitable, someone from our world. I am sure you understand, Claire. You were always a lovely girl, but lovely does not build dynasties." Claire turned to Bradley. He was standing by the French doors, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. He would not look at her. "Bradley?" she whispered. He said nothing. Victoria continued, her voice smooth as silk. "Oh, and one more thing. Bradley and Morgan will be announcing their engagement next month. We wanted to give you time to make arrangements." Morgan Hale, Bradley's ex-girlfriend, the interior designer who had been at 3 of the last 4 Ashford family dinners. The woman Claire had been told was just an old friend. Claire felt something tighten in her chest, not her heart, lower, deeper, a contraction, sharp and sudden. She gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. The manila envelope slid from her lap onto the grass. Sophie was at her side in an instant. Claire, breathe, someone call 911. Claire was on her knees now, one hand on the ground, the other pressed against her belly, in front of 42 people, holding divorce papers, while her mother-in-law watched with cold, quiet satisfaction. The last thing she saw before the paramedics arrived was Victoria, still standing by the gift table, adjusting her bracelet as if nothing had happened. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and fluorescent light and the steady mechanical beeping of a fetal heart monitor. Claire lay on the stretcher, her hand gripping the rail, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. The paramedic beside her was talking, asking questions, but his voice sounded like it was coming through water. "Ma'am, how far along are you?" 8 months, she managed. "Any previous complications?" "No." "We are going to take care of you. Just keep breathing." She kept breathing, in and out, in and out. Not because the paramedic told her to, but because somewhere beneath the shock and the humiliation and the white-hot pain of betrayal there was a voice. A quiet, steady voice that sounded like Ruth, her foster mother. "Keep breathing, baby girl. You have survived worse than this." At Greenwich Hospital, the doctors stabilized her. The contractions were stress-induced, not labor. The baby was in distress, but responding to treatment. They put her on mandatory bed rest and hooked her to an IV drip. A nurse brought her a cup of ice chips and a thin blanket and the kind of gentle smile that people give when they do not know what else to offer. Claire lay in the hospital bed, alone, staring at the acoustic tiles on the ceiling, counting the tiny holes in each one. She had counted to 47 when Sophie walked in. Sophie's face told her everything. "How bad?" Claire asked. Sophie sat down in the chair beside the bed. She did not sugarcoat it. That was one of the things Claire loved about her. Sophie Bennett had never once, in 15 years of friendship, told Claire what she wanted to hear instead of what she needed to hear. Bradley cleaned out the joint account. Everything. $2.3 million. He did it this morning, before the shower. It was planned, Claire. All of it. Claire closed her eyes. What else? Sophie held up her phone. On the screen was an Instagram post from Morgan Hale. A photo of Morgan and Bradley at a restaurant taken the night before. Morgan was smiling, her head tilted against Bradley's shoulder. The caption read, "New beginnings," followed by a red heart. The comments were flooded with congratulations. Claire stared at the photo for a long time, then she handed the phone back. What else? Sophie hesitated. Thomas Kincaid called. Victoria's lawyers filed an emergency motion this afternoon. They are claiming you are an unfit mother. Emotional instability, lack of financial means to support the children. They want temporary custody transferred to Bradley immediately. Claire sat up. The fourth tugged at her arm. They cannot do that. They submitted sworn statements from 3 witnesses, people at the baby shower. They are claiming you had a violent outburst and collapsed in hysteria. They are painting you as unstable, Claire, and the judge has not seen our side yet. 3 witnesses. Claire knew exactly who they were. Patricia Lawton, Margaret Evers, and Diane Caldwell. Victoria's bridge partners. Members of the Greenwich Country Club board. Women who had never spoken more than 10 words to Claire in 6 years and were now, apparently, experts on her mental fitness as a mother. Claire reached for her phone and dialed the Ashford estate. It rang 4 times before a voice answered. Not Bradley, not Victoria. The housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Patterson, this is Claire. I would like to speak to Amelia and Nate, please. A pause. The kind of pause that carries weight. I am sorry, Mrs. Ashford. Mrs. Victoria has instructed us that you are not to have contact with the children until the court rules. The phone slipped from Claire's hand. It landed on the hospital bed with a soft thud, the screen still glowing. She was in a hospital bed. Her baby was at risk. Her money was gone. Her children had been taken. Her reputation was being destroyed in court filings. And all of this had happened in the span of 12 hours. Sophie reached over and took her hand. What are we going to do? Claire stared at the ceiling. For the first time in years, her voice cracked. I do not know. They sat like that for a long time in the quiet hum of the hospital room, with the machines beeping and the hallway buzzing with the ordinary sounds of other people's emergencies. And in that silence, something began to shift inside Claire Weston. Not immediately, not dramatically. It was slow, like the first crack in a frozen lake, invisible to anyone watching, but irreversible. The next 3 days were the longest of her life. She was not allowed to leave the hospital. She was not allowed to see her children. Bradley did not answer her calls. She was served with a temporary restraining order fabricated by Victoria's legal team, keeping her from the Ashford property. The order cited concerns for the safety of the minor children, which was a legal way of saying that Victoria had enough money and enough connections to make a lie look like the truth. On the 3rd night, at 2 a.m, Claire was alone in her hospital room. The hallway lights had been dimmed. The only sound was the soft rhythm of the fetal monitor, steady and sure, like a metronome, keeping time for a song that had not been written yet. She placed her hand on her belly and spoke to her son. I am sorry. I am so sorry I brought you into this. I thought if I was good enough, if I loved hard enough, it would be enough. She cried. Not the polite, controlled tears of a woman maintaining composure, real tears. The kind that come from the place inside you that you thought was empty, but turns out to be full of everything you have been holding back for years. Then she stopped. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She reached for her laptop on the bedside table. She opened it, and she called Thomas Kincaid. He answered on the 2nd ring. His voice was calm as always. Thomas Kincaid had been a federal prosecutor before he went into private practice. He did not rattle easily. Thomas? Claire said. Her voice was different now. Steady, cold, precise. Activate Lakeview. A pause. All of it? Everything. And Thomas, I want you to pull the Ashford financial records. Every company, every trust, every offshore account. I know things about that family they do not think I know. I will have my team on it by morning. She hung up the phone and called Sophie. So what is the plan? Sophie asked. Step 1, we get my children back. Step 2, we show the Ashfords who they married. Step 3. She paused. There is no step 3, because after step 2, there will not be anything left of them. 2 weeks passed. Claire was released from the hospital with strict orders to rest, which she interpreted loosely. She moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Stamford that Sophie had arranged, a far cry from the Ashford estate. But it was hers, and it was clean, and it was quiet, which was all she needed. Thomas Kincaid assembled a legal team of 5 attorneys. They filed counter motions on every front. They requested an expedited hearing on the custody order, and they went to work dismantling the case Victoria's lawyers had so carefully constructed. The first hearing was held on a Tuesday morning in the Stamford Superior Court. Claire wore a simple gray dress. No jewelry, her hair pulled back. She looked like what she was, a pregnant mother who wanted her children back. Victoria arrived in a black town car, flanked by 2 attorneys from Hartford's most expensive firm. She wore a white Chanel suit and carried herself like a woman who had never lost anything in her life. Thomas Kincaid stood before the judge, a stack of documents in his hand. Your Honor, the emergency custody motion filed by the petitioner relies on sworn statements from 3 witnesses who claim to have observed the respondent exhibiting violent and unstable behavior at a family gathering on June 14th. We would like to present evidence that these statements were coordinated and fabricated. He placed the documents on the judge's bench. Text messages, 14 of them, recovered from the phone of Patricia Lawton, one of the 3 witnesses. Messages between Patricia and Victoria Ashford sent the morning of the baby shower, hours before the divorce papers were served. The messages were clear. Victoria had told Patricia exactly what to write. She had coached her on specific language. She had used phrases like, make sure you mention that she was screaming, and use the word erratic. The judge will respond to that. The judge read the messages in silence. Then she looked up at Victoria's attorneys. Counselors, I am going to ask you a simple question. Were you aware that your client coordinated these witness statements? Victoria's lead attorney, a tall man named Richard Holt, shifted in his seat. Your Honor, we were provided with the statements in good faith and had no reason to question their authenticity. The judge was not impressed. I am striking all 3 witness statements from the record. I am vacating the temporary custody order effective immediately. And I am ordering the petitioner's legal team to produce Mrs. Victoria Ashford for a deposition within 30 days regarding these communications. Claire exhaled. It was the first full breath she had taken in 2 weeks. That afternoon, she drove to the Ashford estate to pick up Amelia and Nate. Mrs. Patterson, the housekeeper, met her at the door with the children's overnight bags already packed. She did not say a word, but her eyes said everything. Amelia, 4 years old, ran to Claire and wrapped her arms around her legs. Mommy, I missed you. I missed you too, sweetheart. Nate, Amelia's twin, walked out behind her. He looked up at Claire with big, serious eyes. Mommy, Grandma said you went to live on a farm. Are there horses? Claire knelt down, ignoring the strain on her back, and pulled him close. No, baby, but Grandma might be heading to one soon. That night, back at the apartment, Claire tucked both children into the bed they were sharing and sat with them until they fell asleep. Amelia curled up against her side. Nate held her hand, even in sleep. His small fingers wrapped around her thumb, like he was afraid she might disappear again. Claire sat in the dark, listening to them breathe, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something that resembled peace. The next few days felt almost normal. Thomas was building the divorce case. Sophie was managing Lakeview Capital remotely, keeping the empire running, while Claire focused on the legal battle. The custody motion had been defeated. The fabricated witness statements had been exposed. Claire was winning. She started sleeping through the night again. She cooked breakfast for the twins. She even caught herself humming while washing dishes. A song Ruth used to sing, something old and half forgotten. And then, on a Thursday morning, everything fell apart. Here is something that most people learn too late. Victory is the most dangerous moment in any fight. Not because victory is bad, but because it makes you believe the fight is over. And when you believe the fight is over, you stop watching the door. Claire had stopped watching the door. Claire woke to the sound of her phone vibrating against the nightstand. Not a call. Notifications. Dozens of them, then hundreds. She picked up the phone and opened the first one. A news alert from a New York tabloid. The headline read, "Billionaire wife hid $30 billion fortune from husband." Ashford family demands answers. Her chest went cold. She scrolled through the article. It was not entirely accurate, but it was close enough. Someone had leaked the connection between Claire Weston and Lakeview Capital. The article named the holding company. It referenced real estate holdings across multiple states. It mentioned venture capital investments. It did not have the full picture, but it had enough to blow her cover wide open. Sophie called 30 seconds later. "Have you seen it?" "I am reading it now," Claire said. "Who leaked?" "I do not know. Only 4 people knew about Lakeview. You, me, Thomas, and his staff." Claire sat on the edge of the bed, her mind racing. The twins were still asleep in the next room. The apartment was quiet except for the steady buzz of her phone. Notification after notification. The sound of her carefully constructed life coming undone. By noon, the damage was catastrophic. Bradley's lawyers filed a new motion within hours. Fraud in the marriage. They claimed Claire had deliberately concealed assets from her husband, which under Connecticut law could dramatically affect the divorce settlement. They were now claiming entitlement to half of Lakeview Capital, $15 billion. But the legal filing was not the worst part. The worst part came at 4 o'clock that afternoon, when Victoria Ashford appeared on a nationally syndicated morning talk show, recorded earlier that day. She sat on a beige sofa across from the host, wearing a pale pink dress and pearls. Her hands folded in her lap, the picture of wounded dignity. "We welcomed this girl into our family," Victoria said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "We gave her everything. We loved her like a daughter. And now we discover that she has been lying to all of us for 6 years, hiding billions of dollars, living a double life. What kind of person does that?" She paused, dabbed at her eye with a tissue. "What kind of mother lies to her own husband?" The clip went viral within the hour. Social media turned on Claire overnight. The comments were brutal. Gold digger playing 4D chess. She is no better than they are. Those poor children deserve better. Con artist in a maternity dress. Claire sat in her apartment watching the coverage on her laptop, the screen casting blue light across her face in the darkened room. Sophie sat beside her. "We need to find out who leaked," Sophie said. Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and called Thomas Kincaid. It rang 5 times. No answer. She called again. No answer. An hour later, Thomas called back. His voice was different, stiff, careful. "Claire, I need to tell you something. Victoria's team approached me last week. They offered me $20 million to share your financial structure with them." Claire felt the air leave the room. "And?" "I said no, absolutely not. But Claire..." He paused. "They approached my assistant David too, and David said yes." David Morrison, 26 years old, 2 years out of law school, had been with Thomas's firm for 14 months, had access to Claire's files, her corporate structure, her asset lists, everything. "How much?" Claire asked. "They paid him $300,000. He transferred the files last Tuesday." Claire closed her eyes. The person she trusted most in her professional life had been solid. Thomas had said no, but Thomas had a weak link, and that weak link had sold her for a fraction of what she was worth. Thomas, fire David, report him to the bar, and then I need you to come to my apartment tonight. We need to rebuild the strategy from the ground up. She hung up and looked at Sophie. The Ashfords know everything now, Sophie said. It was not a question. They know what I have, Claire said, but they do not know what I know. And right now, that is the only advantage I have left. That night, after the twins were asleep, Claire sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold. She stared at the wall, not seeing it, her mind turning over every decision she had made in the last 6 years, every secret she had kept, every moment she had chosen silence over truth. She had hidden her wealth because she wanted to be loved for who she was. And now that very decision was being used to destroy her. The thing she had built to protect herself had become the weapon they were using against her. She thought about what Ruth used to say. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. But when someone shows you who they are the second time, make sure there is not a third. The weeks that followed were methodical and merciless. Victoria Ashford did not just want to win the divorce. She wanted to annihilate Claire Weston from every angle, legal, financial, social, and personal, until there was nothing left. Bradley filed for full custody a second time, using the fraud angle. His attorneys argued that Claire's deliberate concealment of $30 billion demonstrated a pattern of pathological deception that rendered her psychologically unfit to raise children. They requested supervised visitation only. Victoria's public relations team, because of course Victoria had a public relations team, planted stories in every outlet that would listen. Claire Weston was not just a liar. She was a con woman, a manipulator who had targeted the Ashford family as part of a long game. One article described her as a foster kid from Ohio who saw an opportunity and took it. Another called her the most expensive catfish in American history. Claire's business partners started calling Sophie, not with encouragement, but with concerns. 2 major real estate deals fell through in a single week. Investors did not want the publicity. A venture capital firm in Boston quietly withdrew from a joint project. The message was clear. Claire Weston was toxic, and money, no matter how much of it there was, did not like toxicity. And then there was Morgan. Morgan Hale moved into the Ashford estate 3 weeks after the baby shower. She redecorated the master bedroom. She hosted a dinner party for Victoria's friends. She posted photos on social media of herself cooking breakfast in Claire's kitchen, walking through Claire's garden, sitting in Claire's chair. Claire saw none of this herself. She had deleted her social media accounts. But the twins saw it, and children, no matter how young, absorb everything. One Sunday evening, after a weekend visit with their father, Amelia and Nate came home quieter than usual. Claire was making dinner when Nate walked into the kitchen and stood in the doorway, his hands in his pockets, looking at the floor. "What is it, buddy?" Claire asked. "Daddy says Morgan is going to be our new mommy." Claire's hand stopped moving. The wooden spoon hovered over the pot. She did not turn around. She could not let him see her face. "Nobody is replacing your mommy, Nate. You have one mommy, and she is standing right here." "But Daddy said—" "I know what Daddy said, and I love your daddy. But some things Daddy says are not true, and this is one of them." Nate nodded slowly, the way children do when they are not entirely convinced, but want to believe you. He walked over and pressed his face against her leg, and she put down the spoon and held him. The final blow came 4 days later. A courier arrived at Claire's apartment with a new set of legal papers. Bradley was petitioning the court to limit her custody to supervised visitation only. The filing cited her secret double life as evidence of a pattern of deception that could psychologically harm the children. That night, after the twins were asleep, Claire sat on the floor of the living room, not on the couch, not in a chair, on the floor, her back against the wall, her knees pulled up, her arms wrapped around them. She had no tears left. She had used them all in the hospital room 3 weeks ago, and since then, the well had been dry. Sophie found her there. She had a key to the apartment and had come by with takeout and a bottle of wine that Claire could not drink because she was still pregnant. Sophie set the bag on the counter, looked at Claire on the floor, and sat down beside her. "Talk to me," Sophie said. "I spent 10 years building something so that no one could ever control me again. So I would never feel like that foster kid with nothing. And now they are using the very thing I built to take my children away." Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she looked around the apartment, the bare walls, the second-hand furniture, the stack of legal documents on the kitchen counter. "You know," Sophie said, "for a woman worth $30 billion, this apartment is really depressing." Claire almost smiled. Almost. The penthouse felt too obvious. There is a middle ground between $30 billion penthouse and witness protection chic. Claire let out a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sigh. And in that small, ridiculous moment, something shifted. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. "I have been playing defense," Claire said. "Yes, you have. My secret is already out. There is no point protecting it anymore." "Correct. So now I need to find theirs." Sophie turned to look at her. "Now you are talking." Claire hired a private forensic accounting firm, not through Thomas, whom she still trusted, but now kept at arm's length. She used a separate contact, a woman named Laura Prescott, who ran a boutique investigation firm out of White Plains. Laura did not advertise. She did not have a website. She had a phone number and a reputation, and both were earned. Claire gave Laura one instruction. "I want to know everything about the Ashford family's finances, not what they show the world, what they hide from it." Laura's team worked for 9 days. On the 10th day, she delivered a report. 47 pages. Claire read it twice. The first time, in disbelief. The second time, with something that felt very close to satisfaction. The Ashford Empire was a house of cards. Bradley's grandfather, Robert Ashford Sr., had built the family fortune in manufacturing and commercial real estate during the 1950s and 60s. By the time he died in 1992, the estate was worth roughly $800 million. Substantial, but not the billions Victoria liked to imply. Bradley's father, Robert Ashford Jr., had managed to lose most of it. Bad investments, over-leveraged properties, a catastrophic bet on subprime mortgages that collapsed in 2008. By the time Robert Jr. had died of a heart attack in 2010, the Ashford fortune had been reduced to approximately $40 million, most of it tied up in the Greenwich estate and a handful of commercial properties that were mortgaged to the limit. Victoria had spent the last 15 years maintaining the illusion. She used a complex web of shell companies and lines of credit, borrowing against the estate to fund a lifestyle that looked like wealth but was actually debt. She hosted charity galas funded by credit lines. She wore designer clothes purchased on store accounts that were perpetually past due. She drove cars that were leased, not owned. And critically, she had been siphoning money from Claire and Bradley's joint accounts for years. Small amounts at first, a few thousand here and there, then larger sums routed through a shell company called Ashford Legacy Holdings, which existed on paper but had no actual operations. Over 6 years, Victoria had quietly drained $4.7 million from the joint accounts money that Claire and Bradley had contributed equally to keep the Ashford facade alive. The Ashfords were not rich. They were $47 million in debt, and they needed Claire's money, specifically the $15 billion they were claiming in the divorce, not to maintain their lifestyle, but to survive. Claire set the report down on the kitchen table. She picked up her tea. She took a sip. She set it down. "There's more," she said to Sophie, who was reading over her shoulder. "More than the family being secretly broke and stealing from you for 6 years? Page 31. Sophie flipped to page 31. Read it again, looked up at Claire. "You have got to be kidding me." Morgan Hale was not just Bradley's ex-girlfriend who had conveniently reappeared. She was Victoria's goddaughter, the daughter of Victoria's college roommate, Elizabeth Hale. Victoria had known Morgan since she was born. She had attended her christening, her high school graduation, her college graduation, and the affair had not happened organically. Victoria had reintroduced Morgan to Bradley 2 years ago at a family Thanksgiving dinner. She had encouraged the relationship. She had facilitated it. She had been paying Morgan a monthly allowance of $25,000 for 24 months, deposited into a personal account at a bank in Westchester, $600,000 total. Morgan Hale was not a homewrecker. She was an employee, a paid actress in Victoria's scheme to replace Claire with someone she could control. Claire closed the report. Her hands were steady. No tears, no anger, just clarity. The kind that comes when you have been stumbling through fog and someone suddenly turns on a floodlight. "Sophie, call Thomas, call Laura, and get me a meeting with Pastor Jim Hartley." Sophie looked confused. "The Ashford family's pastor, why?" "Because Pastor Jim officiated our wedding, and during the rehearsal dinner, he overheard Victoria say something to Bradley that I never forgot. At the time, I thought I misheard it. I convinced myself it was about something else." "What did she say?" Claire looked at Sophie. "She said, 'Marry the girl. Take what you can. When I say it is time, we end it.'" The room was very quiet. "I heard it through a door. I was 6 months into a relationship with a man I loved, and I told myself I had misheard. I told myself it was about something else, some business deal, some family matter, because the alternative was too ugly to accept." Sophie stared at her. "Claire, they planned this from the beginning." "Yes, they did. Victoria saw a woman with no family, no connections, no visible wealth, and she saw an opportunity. Marry the foster kid, take whatever she earns, and when something better comes along, throw her away." Claire stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot of the apartment complex. Not much of a view, but she was not looking at the view. "The only thing they did not plan for," Claire said, "is that the foster kid was worth $30 billion. And the only thing they do not know yet is that I am about to use every single penny of it." Pastor Jim Hartley was 71 years old, with white hair and kind eyes and the sort of quiet authority that comes from 30 years of standing at a pulpit, watching people be their best and worst selves. He had baptized Bradley Ashford. He had married Bradley and Claire, and he had carried a secret for 6 years that had weighed on him more than he liked to admit. He met Claire at a coffee shop in downtown Greenwich on a Wednesday morning. He ordered black coffee. She ordered herbal tea. They sat in a booth near the back, away from the windows. "I know why you are here," he said before she could speak. "I have been expecting this call for a long time. You heard what Victoria said at the rehearsal dinner." "I heard it. I was in the hallway outside the study. The door was open a few inches. Victoria was speaking to Bradley. Her exact words were, 'Marry the girl. Take what you can. When I say it is time, we end it.' And you never said anything." Pastor Hartley looked at his coffee. "I told myself I had misunderstood. I told myself it was taken out of context. And then, over the years, I watched. I watched how Victoria treated you. I watched how Bradley changed. And I knew that I had not misunderstood at all. Would you be willing to provide a sworn statement? He looked at her for a long moment. Yes, I should have spoken up years ago. I am sorry, I did not. Claire nodded. She did not tell him it was okay, because it was not, but she understood. People make bargains with themselves all the time. They see something ugly, and they tell themselves a prettier story, because the truth is too expensive. With Pastor Hartley's statement, the forensic accounting report, and the evidence of Morgan's payments, Claire now had everything she needed. Thomas Kincaid prepared the case. The final hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday, but on Monday night, 3 days before the hearing, Claire's phone rang. It was Bradley. He was crying. Not the performative crying of a man who wants something. Real crying. The kind that comes in gasps and broken syllables. Claire, I am so sorry. I know I do not deserve to say that. But I need you to hear it. My mother, she pressured me. She controlled everything. The divorce, the custody, Morgan, all of it was her. I was too weak to stop it. I was too afraid. Claire sat on the edge of her bed, listening. Her hand rested on her belly. The baby kicked. I want to come home, Bradley said. I want to drop the custody fight. I want to fix this. I know I made a terrible mistake. I know I hurt you. But please, Claire, please, can we just talk? And here is the thing about love. Even when it has been beaten and bruised and left for dead, even when every rational part of your brain is screaming that it is over, there is always a small, stubborn part of your heart that wants to believe, that whispers maybe, that holds on to the memory of who someone used to be before they became who they are. Claire hesitated, not because she wanted Bradley back, but because she wanted her children to have a family. She wanted Amelia and Nate to grow up with two parents who sat at the same dinner table. She wanted the fairy tale, even though she knew fairy tales were written by people who had never been served divorce papers at a baby shower. Meet me tomorrow, she said. Peterson's Bistro, noon. We will talk. She hung up the phone. She sat in the dark, and she allowed herself, for one dangerous moment, to hope. The next morning, Claire put on a simple dress and drove to Peterson's Bistro, a quiet restaurant on Main Street in Greenwich. She arrived 5 minutes early. She asked for a table near the back. She ordered water and waited. Bradley walked in at noon. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes. His shirt wrinkled. He had not shaved. He looked like a man who had not slept in weeks. And behind him, walking through the door, with the precision of a military formation, was Victoria Ashford, and Victoria's attorney, Richard Holt, and a woman Claire did not recognize, carrying a small recording device and a notepad, a court stenographer. Claire understood in an instant. The apology was a script. The tears were a performance. Victoria had coached Bradley to call her, to beg, to say exactly the right words, to get Claire to agree to a meeting. And now they had a court stenographer ready to record Claire expressing willingness to reconcile, which their lawyers would use to argue that the marriage was not irretrievably broken, that would delay the divorce by months. It would keep Claire's assets legally entangled with Bradley's claims. It would buy Victoria time to drain whatever was left. Victoria sat down across from Claire. She smiled. Sit down, Claire. Let us talk about a settlement. 50% seems fair, do you not think? Claire looked at Bradley. You called me crying last night, Bradley. Would not meet her eyes. He stared at the tablecloth. Victoria answered for him. My son did what was necessary, just like he always has. Claire stood up. She did not yell. She did not cry. She did not flip the table or throw water or do any of the things that would have given Victoria exactly what she wanted. Instead, she leaned in close to Victoria, so close that only Victoria could hear, and she said very quietly, "You have no idea what is coming." She walked out of the restaurant. Her heels clicked against the hard wood floor. She did not look back. The final hearing was in 3 days, but Claire was not going to wait for the courtroom. She sat at her kitchen table that night with Sophie and Thomas, a pot of coffee between them and the forensic report spread across the surface like a battle map. "We have 3 moves," Claire said, "and we make all 3 before Thursday." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Before the hearing? That is aggressive. Victoria ambushed me at my baby shower. She fabricated witness statements. She stole $4.7 million from my joint accounts. She paid a woman $600,000 to sleep with my husband. And yesterday, she tried to trap me with a fake reconciliation." Claire looked at Thomas. "I am done being patient. I want them to walk into that courtroom already knowing they have lost." Move 1. Claire had Laura Prescott's forensic accounting report sent not to the court, but directly to the 3 banks that held the Ashford family's largest lines of credit: First National of Connecticut, Meridian Trust, and Hudson Valley Lending. The report documented everything: the shell companies, the inflated asset valuations Victoria had used to secure loans, the fact that the Ashford estate, which Victoria had valued at $32 million on her credit applications, was actually worth closer to $11 million after accounting for existing liens and deferred maintenance. Bank fraud. Plain and simple. Within 48 hours, 2 of the 3 banks froze the Ashford accounts and issued demand letters calling in their loans. The 3rd bank launched an internal review. Victoria's carefully constructed financial facade began crumbling like wet paper. Move 2. Claire's newly hired public relations firm, recommended by Sophie, shared Morgan Hale's payment records with a journalist at the Hartford Courant. Not as a personal attack on Morgan, not as gossip, as documented evidence of Victoria Ashford's pattern of manipulation and financial control. The story ran on Tuesday morning. The headline read, "Mother-in-law paid mistress $600,000 to break up son's marriage." The article was thorough. It included bank statements showing the monthly $25,000 deposits. It included a timeline showing that Victoria had reintroduced Morgan to Bradley 2 years before the divorce filing. It included a statement from a former Ashford household employee who confirmed that Victoria had openly discussed her plan to find Bradley a proper wife, while Claire was still living in the house. By Tuesday afternoon, the story had been picked up by every major news outlet in the country. The narrative flipped overnight. Claire was no longer the lying billionaire. She was the woman whose mother-in-law had literally paid someone to destroy her marriage. Move 3. Pastor Jim Hartley gave an interview to a local Connecticut news station. He did not attack the Ashfords directly. He did not use inflammatory language. He simply told the truth, with the quiet authority of a man who had spent his life in service. "I have been a pastor for 30 years, he said, looking directly into the camera. "I married Bradley and Claire Ashford. I watched them exchange vows, and I can tell you that what I witnessed in that family was not love. It was control, and I believe the truth will speak for itself." Sophie called Claire that evening. Her voice was lighter than it had been in weeks. So Victoria's Country Club just revoked her membership. On what grounds? Apparently they have a policy against members who commit bank fraud. Claire paused. That is a very specific policy. I think it is new. For the first time in a long time, Claire laughed. A real laugh. Thursday morning. The Stamford Superior Court. Courtroom 4B. The hallway outside was crowded with reporters, photographers, and camera crews. The Ashford divorce had become the most talked about legal case in the country, a story that had everything: wealth, betrayal, secret billions, a paid mistress, and a mother-in-law who could have been written by a screenwriter with a grudge. Claire arrived at 8:45. She wore a simple navy dress, no jewelry, flat shoes because her feet were swollen from the pregnancy. Her hair was down. She looked like a woman who had spent the last 6 weeks fighting for her life and her children, because that is exactly what she was. Thomas Kincaid walked beside her, carrying 2 briefcases. He had the calm, focused energy of a man who had prepared for this moment the way a surgeon prepares for an operation, with precision and no room for error. Inside the courtroom, Bradley and Victoria were already seated on the left side. Bradley looked hollow. He had lost weight. His suit hung loose on his shoulders, and his eyes had the glazed, distant look of a man who had realized too late that the woman sitting next to him had ruined his life. Victoria sat with her back straight and her chin high, but the armor had cracks now. Her makeup was heavier than usual, covering what Claire suspected were sleepless nights. Her hands were folded in her lap, but her fingers kept moving, pressing against each other in small, rhythmic twitches. Richard Holt, Victoria's attorney, shuffled papers with the nervous energy of a man who knew he was about to lose, but had not yet figured out how badly. The judge entered. The Honorable Patricia Caldwell, 60 years old, silver reading glasses, no nonsense. She had been on the bench for 22 years and had a reputation for despising theatrics. This court is now in session. We are here for the final hearing in the matter of Ashford versus Ashford. Counselors, please proceed. Thomas Kincaid stood. Your Honor, before we address the standard matters of asset division and custody, I need to bring several urgent issues to the court's attention. These issues speak directly to the character and conduct of the petitioner and his family, and they are supported by extensive documentation. He opened the first briefcase. Item 1. Financial fraud. Over the past 6 years, Mrs. Victoria Ashford has systematically siphoned $4.7 million from the joint accounts of Claire and Bradley Ashford. The funds were routed through a shell company called Ashford Legacy Holdings, which has no employees, no operations, and no legitimate business purpose. The sole function of this entity was to funnel marital funds to Mrs. Victoria Ashford for personal use. He placed the bank records on the judge's bench, transaction by transaction, date by date. $4.7 million, documented to the penny. Item 2. The orchestrated affair. The relationship between Bradley Ashford and Morgan Hale was not spontaneous. It was engineered by Victoria Ashford, who is Morgan Hale's godmother. Victoria reintroduced Morgan to Bradley at a family event 2 years ago and subsequently paid Morgan a monthly stipend of $25,000 for 24 consecutive months. Total payments, $600,000. He placed the payment records on the bench. Bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, a timeline cross-referenced with social media posts and phone records. Item 3. Fraudulent custody filings. The emergency custody motion filed on June 15th relied on sworn statements from 3 witnesses who claimed to have observed Mrs. Claire Ashford exhibiting violent behavior. As this court has already determined, those statements were coordinated by Victoria Ashford through text messages that coached the witnesses on specific language. Item 4. The Ashford financial reality. The petitioner's family has represented themselves throughout these proceedings as a family of substantial means. The reality is that the Ashford family is currently $47 million in debt. The Greenwich estate is mortgaged 3 times over. 2 banks have frozen the family's accounts pending fraud investigations. The Ashford empire, Your Honor, is a facade. The courtroom was silent. Bradley stared at the table. Victoria's fingers had stopped twitching. She was perfectly still. The way an animal is still when it knows it has been spotted by a predator. Item 5. The testimony of Pastor James Hartley, who officiated the Ashford wedding. Pastor Hartley has provided a sworn statement attesting that, on the evening of the rehearsal dinner, he overheard Victoria Ashford say the following words to her son: "Marry the girl. Take what you can. When I say it is time, we end it." Thomas let the words hang in the air. Then he turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this marriage was not a marriage. It was a scheme. From the very beginning, Victoria Ashford planned to use Claire Weston as a financial resource to be exploited and discarded. Every action she has taken, the baby shower ambush, the fabricated custody motions, the orchestrated affair, all of it was part of a calculated plan to strip my client of her money, her children, and her dignity." He paused, opened the second briefcase, which brings me to the matter that the opposing counsel has raised repeatedly throughout these proceedings: the question of my client's concealed assets. Richard Holt sat up. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The fraud argument, the $15 billion claim. Thomas continued. The petitioner's team has characterized my client as a woman of limited means who married above her station and secretly amassed wealth through deception. I would like to correct the record. He placed a single document on the bench. Claire Weston is the sole owner and founder of Lakeview Capital, a holding company with independently audited assets valued at $30.2 billion. This includes 340 commercial properties across 12 states, a venture capital portfolio with stakes in 47 technology companies, and controlling interest in 3 publicly traded firms. The courtroom did not gasp. It went silent, the kind of silence that happens when a room full of people collectively stops breathing. My client did not hide her wealth to deceive her husband. She hid it because she wanted to be loved for who she was, not what she had. And instead, the Ashford family married her under false pretenses, presenting themselves as wealthy when they were, in fact, bankrupt, and systematically planned to divorce her and claim assets they never contributed to. Thomas reached into the briefcase one final time and pulled out a document that was older than the others, yellow-edged, dated 6 years ago. Your Honor, I would like to enter into evidence the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties prior to the marriage. This agreement was drafted at the insistence of Mrs. Victoria Ashford and prepared by the Ashford family's attorneys. It was designed to protect Ashford family assets in the event of divorce. He placed it on the bench. The prenuptial agreement states, and I quote, that each party shall retain sole ownership of all assets acquired individually prior to and during the marriage, provided such assets are held in separately titled accounts or entities. He looked at Richard Holt. Lakeview Capital is a separately titled entity. It has always been held solely in Claire Weston's name. It was established before the marriage and has been maintained separately throughout, under the terms of the prenuptial agreement that Victoria Ashford insisted upon. Every single dollar of Lakeview Capital is protected. Richard Holt's face went white. The very document that Mrs. Victoria Ashford forced my client to sign, the document designed to protect Ashford wealth from a woman she considered beneath her family, is the document that now protects my client's $30 billion empire from the Ashford family's claims. Victoria's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No sound came out. The judge reviewed the prenuptial agreement. She reviewed the financial documents. She reviewed Pastor Hartley's sworn statement. She took 45 minutes. Then she issued her ruling. Full custody of all 3 children awarded to Claire Weston. Bradley Ashford receives no claim to Lakeview Capital assets, per the terms of the prenuptial agreement. Claire Weston is awarded restitution of $4.7 million siphoned by Victoria Ashford, plus punitive damages. The court refers the matter of Victoria Ashford's conduct to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into fraud, perjury, witness tampering, and financial manipulation. The gavel came down, and it was over. Outside the courthouse, the sun was bright and the air smelled like cut grass and the first warmth of summer. Reporters lined the steps, cameras clicking, microphones extended. Claire stood at the top of the steps for a moment, feeling the sunlight on her face. Thomas stood beside her. Sophie stood on the other side. Behind her, somewhere in the building, Victoria Ashford was learning what it felt like to have the world see her for exactly who she was. Claire stepped up to the microphones. She did not have a prepared statement. She did not need one. I did not build my life to prove anything to anyone, she said. I built it so that my children would never know what it feels like to have nothing. Today is not about revenge. It is about truth. And the truth is simple. You cannot take from someone what was never yours to begin with. She answered 3 questions. Then she walked to her car. Sophie opened the door for her. Claire got in, buckled her seatbelt, and drove home to her children. The weeks that followed brought the kind of justice that satisfies not because it is cruel, but because it is complete. Victoria Ashford was arrested on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the hearing. The charges were bank fraud, perjury, and witness tampering. She was photographed being escorted from the Greenwich estate in handcuffs, wearing the same cream-colored suit she had worn to the baby shower. Her country club friends, the same women who had provided false witness statements on her behalf, declined to post bail. Patricia Lawton later told a reporter, "I barely knew the woman." Bradley moved out of the estate before the bank seized it. He rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Stamford. His credit was destroyed. The Ashford name, once a synonym for old money elegance, now appeared in headlines next to words like fraud and scheme and arrest. He got a job at a car dealership in Norwalk, selling sedans. 3 months later, he sent Claire a letter, not a legal document, a real letter, handwritten on plain paper. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not make excuses. He wrote, simply, that he was sorry, that he had been weak, that he had let his mother make every important decision in his life, including the decision to throw away the only person who had ever truly loved him. He wrote that he knew it was too late and that he was not writing to change anything, but because she deserved to hear the truth at least once. Claire read the letter at her kitchen table. She folded it. She put it in a drawer. She did not respond. Morgan Hale gave an interview to a magazine in September. She was honest. She said Victoria had recruited her. She said the money had started as a favor and become a trap. She said she was ashamed. She moved back to her hometown in Michigan and took a job at a small design firm. Claire did not hate Morgan. In many ways, Morgan was just another person Victoria had used and discarded. Claire's son, James, was born on a Tuesday in August. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, healthy, strong lungs. He screamed for the first 20 minutes of his life, and Claire held him and laughed and cried at the same time, which is the only appropriate response when something you almost lost arrives safely in your arms. 6 months after the hearing, Claire moved to Manhattan with her 3 children. The penthouse on the Upper West Side had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Central Park. It was the kind of home she had dreamed about as a girl in foster care, lying on a narrow bed in a shared room in Columbus, Ohio, staring at the water-stained ceiling and imagining what it would feel like to live somewhere beautiful. She was on the cover of Forbes in October. The headline read, "The $30 billion woman nobody saw coming." The article told her story from the beginning: the foster homes, the late nights studying real estate law at a community college library. The first property she bought, at 23, a foreclosed duplex in Cleveland, purchased for $47,000, which she renovated and sold for $112,000. Then another, then the holding company, then the venture fund, then the empire. She launched a foundation that November, the Weston Foundation, dedicated to providing legal aid, financial education, and transitional housing for women leaving abusive and controlling marriages. The foundation's first office opened in Stamford, Connecticut. Its second opened in Columbus, Ohio, 2 blocks from the group home where Claire had spent her 14th birthday eating cake from a gas station and wishing for a life that felt like hers. Now here is something worth thinking about. Somewhere out there, right now, someone is being underestimated. Someone is sitting in a room full of people who have decided she is less than, less smart, less capable, less worthy. And that someone is quietly, patiently, methodically building something that none of those people can see. And one day, she will not need to announce it. They will simply look up and realize that the ground they are standing on belongs to her. Remember that. Because the most powerful people in the world are not the ones making the most noise. They are the ones building in silence. One evening in December, Sophie came to visit. They sat on the terrace, wrapped in blankets, watching the city lights reflected in the glass buildings across the park. Sophie had a glass of wine. Claire had chamomile tea, which she had been drinking since the pregnancy and had somehow never stopped. "So," Sophie said, $30 billion, a Forbes cover, 3 beautiful kids, the most famous divorce in America. What is next?" Claire took a sip of her tea. "I was thinking about buying something. A yacht, an island, a small country?" Claire smiled. "The Ashford estate just went up for auction." Sophie stared at her. "You would not. I am going to turn it into a women's shelter." Sophie laughed so hard she spilled her wine on the blanket. "Claire Weston, you are absolutely terrifying." "Thank you." That was not entirely a compliment. "I know." They sat together in the quiet, watching the city breathe, and Claire thought about all the things she had survived, all the doors that had closed, all the people who had looked at her and seen someone disposable. And she thought about the doors she had opened herself, with her own hands, with her own strength, with the stubborn refusal to be what other people decided she was. 2 weeks later, on a Friday evening, Claire was standing in the doorway of her penthouse, looking out over Manhattan. The children were asleep. The apartment was quiet. The city stretched out below her, endless and electric. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. "Bradley," she answered. He was crying. "Please, Claire, I made a mistake. I will do anything. Just let me see the kids. Let me be part of their lives." Claire was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the divorce papers framed on the wall of her office. Not a trophy, a reminder. A reminder that the worst day of her life had also been the first day of the rest of it. "Bradley, you can see the children. They deserve a father. But you and I are done, and your mother made sure of that the day she handed me those papers at my baby shower. She paused. You should have loved me. She hung up the phone, set it on the counter, walked to the window. The city stretched out before her, alive with light and sound and the 10 million stories of 10 million people chasing something, running from something, building something. And somewhere in that vast glittering grid, a woman in a shelter was reading a pamphlet from the Weston Foundation. And somewhere else, a little girl in a foster home was staring at a water-stained ceiling and dreaming of a life that felt like hers. And Claire Weston stood at the window and whispered, to no one and to everyone, to the girl she had been and the woman she had become. They thought I was nobody. They thought I had nothing. They handed me divorce papers at my baby shower and told me I was disposable. But here is what they never understood. The quietest person in the room is often the most powerful, because while everyone else is talking, she is building. And somewhere far below, the city kept moving. And Claire Weston, 32 years old, mother of 3, foster kid from Ohio, and the woman who had built a $30 billion empire in silence, turned off the lights and went to check on her children. The storm had passed. The reckoning was over. And the life she had built, the real one, the one that no one could take, was only just beginning. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, your silence is not weakness. It is strategy. Disclaimer: this content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful storytelling with real-life lessons. Every word was crafted with purpose, to entertain, to inspire, and to remind you that your story is worth telling. Thank you for watching.